Now this episode is featuring the bro, Tony Sunshine. Now Tone, tell the viewers where you were born and where you was raised. Introduce yourself to the people.
I go by the name of Tony Sunshine. My peoples call me T, Shine, Tone, for short. I'm a Bronx boy, man. I'm a BX boy. I was born in the Bronx. I was raised in East Tremont, Crotona. We bounced back and forth from there to 166 and 10 Forest Projects.
Paint a picture of the environment that you grew up in.
I got the Forest Projects in the late 80s, going into the 90s. The projects was upside down. It was lit. It was Vietnam out there. I was a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. I kept a smile on my face and I maintained upbeat. Mama was trying to make it happen. She was doing the best she possibly could. I had a stepdad, but he was a wild boy. We was basically facing all the adversities that everyone else was.
So at what age did you start singing, and when did you start getting interested in pursuing a music career?
I've been singing since I was about 5 years old. My mom was cleaning the crib one day. It was on a Sunday, she says. She had the music on loud. She was playing Menudo, If You're Not Here. And she said she can hear me in the kitchen singing at the top of my lungs. And she ran over to the kitchen and she turned the music off and she asked me to do it again. She said I did it again. She couldn't believe her ears. So she grabbed me by the hand and she ran over to my grandmother's crib. It was right next door. And she had me sing for my grandmother, who then started crying. The rest is history.
How old was you when you first met the late, great Big Pun? And tell the people, when did you meet Joe? Because if I'm not mistaken, Joe's from Forest Projects as well. So did you know Joe before you knew Pun, or did you know Pun before you knew Joe?
When I was 13 years old, I was hanging out across the street, 23 Park, which is right across the street from Forest Projects, and I was hanging out with a mutual friend of ours that I knew him, that Joe originally grew up with. And I asked him how I could go about singing something for Joe. And he told me just walk up on him and sing for him. And so I gained the courage and I did. I walked up to Joe. I sang Forever My Lady by Jodeci for him, and he was flabbergasted. He was like, yo, you really sing. Like, you really can sing. The very next day, he pulled out the Forest Projects with Full Flex, God bless the dead. They was in the black MPV. Flex told me to jump in. I went with them to Relativity record. Rest is history, man. I've been around Joe for a long time. I met Pun when I was about 15, going on 16, I believe. Met him in 23 Park, which is right across the street from my projects. And I met him through a bunch of different mutual friends.
So who would you say put you on? Would you say it was Pun that put you on, or would you say that it was Joe that put you on?
I would say they both had something to do with putting me on. The fact is that if there was no Joe, there would be no Pun. They both had a whole lot to do with creating Tony Sunshine. They both had a lot to do with giving me a platform and allowing me to showcase my talent. I appreciate both. Can't have one without the other.
How you got the name Tony Sunshine?
We were sitting in Pun's crib one day. He had a bunch of different people coming over to interview him. This particular day, I believe he had Source Magazine coming over to interview him. And before they came over, he and I had a conversation on how I needed to come up with a new name, because everyone called me R&B, which stood for Rough Brother. That was given to me by one of the original members, Giz. Pun then told me to give him a few minutes that he was gonna come up with a name. He came up with quite a few which I disliked, and we went back and forth and joked and laughed about those names. And during his interview, they asked him if he had something new that he was interested in, or any new business endeavors or any projects he was dropping, and he was like, yeah, you probably heard of him, which nobody ever heard of me about that time. You probably heard of him, Tony Sunshine. He's my artist. He's gonna do to the R&B game what I did to the hip hop community. The rest is history. I stood branded with Tony Sunshine.
So when did you get your first big break? And then who did you sign your first record deal with? And who helped facilitate that?
I signed my first record deal to Loud Records, which was Steve Rifkin, through Terror Squad. They had Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, they had Davina. I don't know if people remember Davina. You gotta be a real hip hop head to remember Davina. Of course, they had Pun. Unfortunately, I wasn't signed to Loud while Pun was alive. I signed to Loud Records maybe a year after he passed. God bless the dead. The building was lit though. It was definitely an experience when you went up in there, and Steve Rifkin was always on tilt doing this thing. Motherfuckers was in there shooting dice and shooting craps for 100 bands. It was dope, man. It was a real authentic time in hip hop. It was a real authentic time in the game, and I'm really, 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 really happy that I got the chance to experience some of those things and be in the room with some of the greats.
So yo, Tone, describe to the people what kind of dude Pun was.
Pun was a happy-go-lucky individual. He loved to show love. Everything he did was for his friends and his family. He was a very honest, upfront individual. If he fucked with you, he fucked with you. If he liked you, you would understand that he liked you. And if he didn't fuck with you, then there would be no reason for you to be around, because it was going to be more than obvious that he didn't like you and you shouldn't be around. That nigga Pun is crazy.
Is it true that Pun once went by the name Big Moondog? And how did he get that name? Do you know where it originated?
I believe that when I met Pun, he already had that name to him. Big Moondog is something that he came to the block with, so I wouldn't even begin to tell you where he got the name from. I just know that that was the name he had before Big Punisher.
The Full Eclipse crew. Was that Pun's crew?
That is correct. The Full Eclipse crew was Pun's crew. Full Eclipse consists of Big Pun, Cuban Link, and Triple Sace. Full Eclipse was a crew that was developed down the block and around the corner, and it consists of individuals from Ranch and Littlevilles. Ranch was one project building, one big giant project building, and Ranch was a bunch of small, low project complex joints in the same block, same area. So Full Eclipse was a crew that came from there, down the block and around the corner.
So Tone, tell me where you was when you got the news that Pun passed away.
I believe I had broke night in the studio. I went home. I most likely had a hangover. It was a lot of Hennessy and a lot of Coors Light back then. I woke up the very next day, and I know that they was trying to keep me away from the radios and my cell phone. And, you know, it was definitely a funny morning. I believe they did a good job up to a certain point. My little man came to come pick me up, and we was riding out, and I finally had turned the radio on, and I hear Angie Martinez crying, and she was talking about it, and you know, it just went dark, bro. I remember everything just going into slow motion and going dark, and you know, I was just in disbelief because Pun had just called me the night before. He kept telling me to come over because I would spend the majority of my time with Pun. Like, I was with Pun 24 hours a day. Like, I was with Pun more than I was with myself. I believe I had finally got home and had some downtime with the family, and I was taking care of some things, and he kept calling me to come fuck with him. And I had promised him I was, and I wasn't quick enough. I ain't moved quick enough because I had a couple of obligations and things I was gonna take care of. So, you know, my whole world was upside down.
Who would you say are the original members of the Terror Squad?
As far as Terror Squad goes, Terror Squad's been around for a long, long time, bro. There's just too many members to determine or speak on who's original and who's not. Now, as far as making music goes, I really ain't got no words on that. I really wouldn't want to open that can of worms. I've been around since I was 13 years old. I would most definitely call myself an original member. I wouldn't say a founder, but definitely an original member. Fat Joe's definitely an original founding member. Armageddon, I would say Armageddon is an original member of Terror Squad.
Now, what were your thoughts when Joe and Cuban Link had their little beef?
At the time, my thoughts was, these are two individuals who break bread together. These are two individuals who have shared a little bit of history. You know, we gotta allow them to take care of it on their own. These ain't just two regular dudes from the street. These are two family members having a dispute. So my frame of mind was fall back and let them handle their business as long as it don't get out of hand. Then I don't gotta intervene and play mediator.
Coming up in that 90s era, was there ever any beef between Forest and Davison or Castle Hill projects? Was there any rifts? And did you ever hear of Sex Money Murder and Pistol Pete and those guys from the Soundview, Castle Hill area?
Coming up in the 90s and coming from Forest projects, You know, I seen it all. Like, it was always beef. It was definitely tension in the air coming from all angles. Being a musician, being part of a major rap group, being part of a legendary crew, you inherit some shit all the time. There's always somebody who wants to either earn points, earn a notch, make a name for themselves, and it was always a situation. As far as Castle Hill, as far as Sex, Money, Murder, Pistol Pete and them, of course, who didn't hear them? Sex, Money, Murder is a legendary topic.
Now, Tone, coming out of Forest Projects, who were some of those guys? Now, I'm gonna say outside of Joe that influenced you. Of course, Joe and them had a influence on you musically, but who were some of them guys from the neighborhood that wasn't in the music industry, that was the movers and shakers in that hood that you could speak on?
The individuals we looked up to in my area, in my radius, like Cypress and Brook Ave and down to Southern Boulevard. You know, we had Chicky, the Emperor, Chicky from Southern Boulevard. Of course, Boy George. Amongst a lot of other street legends that come from my area that we looked up to and was the topic and was always the center of attention. We had Angel Cartagena, AKA Money Man. He was a super legend to us. We looked up to him heavy. You know, I had my OGs, I had my older cats that I looked up to, such as Power. He's an original member of Terror Squad, and his brother Giz, who is also another member of Terror Squad. And I was a young, wild adolescent. These are the guys that was showing me the ropes. Them amongst a lot of other cats.
Were you on the label when 50 and Joe had their little riff going on?
Remember vividly the Fat Joe and 50 beef. Joe probably gonna kill me for telling this story, man, but I was definitely against that whole situation. I was definitely against Joe involving himself in that drama and being a part of that. Shout out to Joe and 50, man. I'm glad that that's something that's in the past, and you know, it's definitely a blessing to be able to watch them come together and share moments.
And did you join the Terror Squad after Pun passed away or before Pun passed away?
My affiliation with Terror Squad came from coming from Forest Projects. From the minute I had a conversation with Power, the minute I had a conversation with God Bless the Dead Giz, the very first time that was it. That was family. So when people ask me, did I join Terror Squad after Pun passed away? It's like, nah, I was always Terror Squad. You know what I mean? With no disrespect at all. I was Terror Squad before Pun was Terror Squad. I was Terror Squad before Pun even knew Terror Squad existed.
What were some of the circumstances that led you to part ways with the Terror Squad?
I think that I was more so just frustrated with the industry, period. I was frustrated with the labels, and you know, at the time everybody was going through their individual frustrations and depressions, and everybody was going through their ups and downs, and nobody understood what everybody else was going through. Joe and I never really had a conversation on what was going on. I definitely didn't know that he was going through his depression state after Pun passed away. And according to what I knew and according to what I seen, everybody was happy and I was the only individual going through something. So now looking back and understanding that everybody was facing adversities and everybody was facing their demons and going through their situations, it makes it much easier to understand what was going on. But at the time, I was just frustrated with the music industry and my label, and you know, I couldn't understand why my music wasn't coming out and I didn't have a legitimate single out on the radio. I didn't have no legitimate visuals, and you know, I just felt like it was time for me to move on, and I had to make a move. I did what I thought was right for myself, and I asked for a release. I didn't leave because Joe was doing bad. I didn't leave because the label didn't have no money. I didn't leave because I had an outstanding major beef with Joe or because Joe was robbing me. I didn't leave because of anything out the ordinary other than I felt like I had to make a move if I was gonna be heard. You gotta imagine my frustrations at the time, just being a young Latino from the Bronx and having all the pressures of the world, being this guy that has to set the pace for his people. You know, the pressures that Pun had left on my shoulders, you know, talking about I was gonna do to the R&B game what he did to the hip hop community. That's a lot of pressure. Just being a Latino in a black dominated game, so to speak, with all due respect, it was just a lot of pressure, you know, and I felt all kinds of ways. you could imagine how I felt having to move away from something I loved so much. Because let's be clear, Joe is an idol to me. Joe's an icon to me. Like, I love Joe with all my heart. Like, he could do no wrong. He is a God. So you could imagine how frustrated and how alone I felt wanting to make that move.
We lost a lot of good dudes, man. I want to say rest in peace to Fred the Godson. I know that was a close comrade of yours.
Yeah, I know Fred since he was about 15, 16, 17. That was my guy, man. When I first met him, he was just hilarious. He used to ask me mad questions about jewelry and diamonds and pendants and watches and shit like that. And then, he came into a few dollars one time and he went and got himself a custom-made TBM medallion. He got himself a 2-finger ring. He got himself a nice little watch, the colorful joints. And he was so excited, he called me up to try to shit on me with it real quick. He wanted to let me know that he got himself some fire. He wanted me to pull up on him, so I pulled up on him in the studio. He tried to stunt on me with the chains, and it was dope. But me being who I am, I wanted to fuck with him, so I was like, that shit is whack. Then he looked at me, he was like, get the fuck out of here. That was my guy, man. Shit hit me kind of hard, man. I was just talking with him. He was just kicking it through text message. He just sent me a song to jump on. I just sent him something to jump on. I was just in the studio with him. So ultimately, we have a record together, Fred and I. We have a song entitled Revolution. And it's crazy because I made this record about 3 years ago, and it was just sitting in the archives. And my guy Los just kept telling me, yo, this is a record. This is a real record. It means something. And I said, you know what? Let me think outside the box. Who would I send this record to? And I sent it to Fred. Fred did an amazing job on it. His message was clear. His message was dope and straight to the point. Needless to say that what's going on today, the song matches up so crazy with what's going on. The message is so insane with what's going on. So I decided to take it back off of all platforms, revisit it, get it mixed and mastered properly, put it under his wife and kids' name, and make sure that they get all the proceeds to that record. So that's what's coming next. I'm trying to do an animated video for it.
Right now, bro, what you got going on? Tell the people where they can find the music at. Tell the people what you into, man.
As far as music goes, I'm in the studio every day, man. I'm always working on my craft. I always got a trick up my sleeve. I'm always working on a new sound. But I'm what you call a music hoarder. I got so much music to give, but I don't allow anyone to hear it because I don't feel like it's perfect enough. I need my shit to be perfect. And, a lot of people say that that's some of my problem. It would be unfair to the fans that have been waiting for over 2 decades for a Tony Sunshine album and who still support and who still believe, for me to give them a mediocre project. You know what I mean? So I'm making sure that I do the right thing by it. You can find me on Instagram at I am Tony Sunshine. I am Tony Sunshine on Instagram. Look for that blue check. There's a lot of phony pages out there. Facebook is Tony Sunshine BX, and Twitter the same. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I utilize Instagram the most.